The laughter started in first class. "Check out Maverick back there," Jake Morrison said, nudging his co-pilot buddy Ryan Chen with his elbow. He tilted his head toward the economy cabin, where passengers were still filing aboard Flight 447 from Phoenix to Newark. "Row 23, the fashion icon." Ryan craned his neck, following Jake's gaze. An elderly man was settling into a window seat, his movements slow and deliberate. He wore a faded leather Air Force jacket, the kind with a fur collar that had seen better days. Probably several decades ago. The leather was cracked and worn to a dull brown, and a service patch on the shoulder had frayed so badly the insignia was barely visible. "Oh man," Ryan snorted, leaning back in his seat. "That thing looks like it survived a war with a pack of moths." "Goodwill special," Jake said confidently, taking a sip of his pre-flight coffee. $5 max. These old guys love playing dress-up. Stolen valor, probably?" They were young, both of them. Jake was 31, Ryan 29. They'd flown together for 2 years on this regional route, racking up hours in their logbooks and dreams of upgrading to international routes. They were good pilots, technically proficient, confident, perhaps a shade too confident. The kind of confidence that comes from flying modern aircraft with triple redundant systems and computers that could practically land themselves. "I mean, I respect the aesthetic," Jake continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "Very retro. Very, I fought in a war that may or may not have happened." "You think he tells people he flew F-14s? "Definitely F-14s, Ryan agreed. "Everyone picks Top Gun. No one ever claims they flew a cargo plane or a tanker." A flight attendant, Sarah, passed by their open cockpit door. She'd overheard the conversation. Her expression tightened, but she said nothing. She'd learned in her 15 years of service that young pilots often needed to learn humility the hard way. She glanced back at the old man in 23A. He was staring out the window, his weathered hands folded in his lap. Something about his posture, the straightness of his spine despite his age, the stillness of his gaze, made her pause, but the moment passed. She had 200 passengers to attend to. The old man's name was Colonel James Sandman Harlow, though no one on the plane knew it. He was 79 years old. The jacket wasn't from Goodwill. It had been issued to him in 1968, when he was 22 years old and freshly minted as an Air Force pilot. He'd worn it through 2 tours in Vietnam, flying C-130 Hercules transports into landing zones so hot the aluminum skin of his aircraft had been pocked with bullet holes more times than he could count. The patch on his shoulder, the one so faded Jake and Ryan had dismissed it, was from the 374th Tactical Airlift Wing. Underneath the jacket, hidden from view, his chest bore a silver star, 2 distinguished flying crosses, and a Purple Heart. He never wore the medals. He rarely even wore the jacket anymore. But today was different. Today marked 55 years since the day he'd lost his co-pilot, Tommy Chen, no relation to Ryan, over the Mekong Delta. He wore the jacket once a year, on this day, as a private ritual of remembrance. He hadn't flown a plane in over 20 years. His hands had a slight tremor now, arthritis creeping into the joints that had once gripped a yoke through conditions that would have grounded modern aircraft without a second thought. He'd accepted his age, his irrelevance in a world of glass cockpits and computerized flight management systems. He stared out the window as the engine spooled up, listening to the familiar whine of the turbines. A Boeing 737-800, reliable workhorse. He knew the sound of jet engines the way a musician knows the notes of a symphony. This one sounded good healthy. He closed his eyes as the plane began to taxi. 38 minutes into the flight, cruising at 36,000 feet over the Kansas plains, the world changed. A sound, sharp, metallic, wrong, rang through the cabin. It was followed immediately by a violent shudder that rattled overhead bins and sent unsecured items tumbling into the aisles. Passengers gasped. A child began to cry. In the cockpit, Jake's coffee cup exploded across the center console. "What the hell was that?" Ryan shouted, his hands flying to the controls. Warning lights erupted across the panel like fireworks. Master caution. Engine fire. Hydraulic pressure. Flight control malfunction. The stick shaker began to rattle, warning of an impending stall. "Engine 2!" Jake barked, his eyes scanning the instruments. "We've got a compressor failure. Fire in the right engine." Ryan's training kicked in, shutting down Engine 2, activating fire suppression. Jake pulled the fire handle. The warnings should have stopped. They didn't. "Fire's not out!" Ryan's voice had climbed half an octave. "Jake, the fire's not out." In the cabin, passengers were screaming now. The plane was yawing to the right, the asymmetric thrust pulling them into a slow, sickening turn. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, dangling like obscene yellow fruit. Sarah, the flight attendant, grabbed the intercom handset, her voice professionally calm despite the terror in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing a technical issue." Another violent shudder. The aircraft dropped suddenly, losing altitude. The screaming intensified. In the cockpit, Jake was on the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday! United 447, we have an uncontained engine failure, fire in the right engine, multiple flight control warnings requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport." The controller's voice came back, crisp and urgent. "United 447, roger your mayday. Kansas City is 40 miles northeast. Turn left heading 030, descend and maintain flight level 240, left heading 030. Jake yanked the yoke. Nothing happened. His blood turned to ice. Ryan, I don't have aileron control. The yoke's not responding." Ryan's hands were shaking now, all swagger evaporated. "Hydraulics. We've lost hydraulic system A. No, wait. We've lost A and B. We're on backup only." "Backup won't give us enough control authority for a turn." Jake's voice was climbing toward panic. "We can't maneuver." This was the nightmare scenario. The one they'd trained for in simulators but never truly believed would happen. Modern aircraft weren't supposed to fail like this. Triple redundancy. Computer backups. Fail-safes upon fail-safes. Except they just had. In the cabin, the passengers could feel it. The plane was flying straight, unable to turn, a wounded bird locked on a course to nowhere. Some were praying. Others were crying. A few were frantically texting loved ones, last words typed with trembling thumbs. Row 23. All sat motionless. Colonel Harlow's eyes were open now, sharp and clear. His hands were no longer folded. They were gripping the armrests, not in fear, but in calculation. He was listening. Listening to the angle of the engines, one screaming, one dead. Listening to the way the airframe was responding. Listening to the subtle vibrations traveling through the fuselage. He'd felt this before. Not in a 737, but in a burning C-130 over Laos with one engine gone, another on fire, and hydraulic fluid spraying across his windscreen like blood. He unbuckled his seatbelt. Sarah appeared in the aisle, her face pale. "Sir, you need to remain seated." "Where's the cockpit?" His voice was steady, not loud, but carrying an authority that made her stop mid-sentence. "Sir, I can't let you. I'm a pilot." He was already moving, pushing past her with a strength that belied his age. "I can help them." Sarah hesitated for only a second. Then she saw his eyes. Calm, focused, utterly certain, and made a decision that would either save 200 lives or be the worst mistake of her career. She led him to the cockpit door. Jake nearly punched the old man when the door opened. "Get him out of here!" he shouted, not even looking up from the instruments. Sweat was pouring down his face. "Sarah, what the hell are you—" Listen to him, Sarah said quietly. Just listen. We have 30 seconds before we lose all control authority, the old man said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. Your backup hydraulic system is being drained by the leak in System B. You're trying to turn using spoilers and differential thrust, but you're doing it wrong. Ryan spun in his seat, his face a mask of desperate hope and territorial anger. Who the hell are you? Someone who's flown a broken plane before. Colonel Harlow stepped forward, his eyes sweeping the panel. Ancient eyes, but they were reading the instruments faster than Jake could process. You've got asymmetric thrust pulling you right. You're trying to counter with left rudder, but you're overcompensating. You're inducing a Dutch roll. Stop it. We're trying to turn to Kansas City. Forget Kansas City. You'll never make the turn. That fire is burning through your tail section. You've got maybe 5 minutes before it hits the vertical stabilizer, and you lose all directional control. You need to find a place to put this bird down now. Straight ahead. What's in front of you? Jake pulled up the moving map, his hands shaking. Nothing. Farmland, open fields. Then that's your runway. The old man's hand came down on Jake's shoulder, firm, grounding. You're going to perform a controlled descent into a field. No flaps. You don't have hydraulic pressure for them. No slats. You're landing this plane like a glider with a single engine at idle thrust for directional control. That's insane, Ryan whispered. We'll never survive. You won't survive trying to make Kansas City. The colonel's voice had steel in it now, the voice of a man who'd ordered scared young men to fly into hell and bring them back alive. I've done this before. You haven't. So right now you're going to shut up, and you're going to do exactly what I tell you. Copy? Jake met his eyes. In that moment, he saw something that his 2 years of commercial flying and 4 years of flight school had never shown him. He saw a man who had looked death in the face and negotiated terms. Copy, Jake said. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Jake Morrison's life. The old man, he still didn't know his name, stood between the 2 pilots' seats, his voice a steady metronome of commands. Stabilize your pitch, 4 degrees nose down. That's it. Hold it there. Reduce thrust on engine 1 to 60%. You're going to use it like a rudder, small inputs. Altitude? 22,000, Ryan read, his voice steadier now. Rate of descent? 1,800 feet per minute. Too fast, you need to bleed speed but maintain control. Extend the landing gear. The gear? Jake's head snapped up. That'll create massive drag. Exactly. It'll slow you down and give you a fixed reference for your glide path. Do it, now. Jake's hand moved to the gear lever. The thunk of the wheels dropping into the slipstream was followed by a pronounced deceleration. Good. Now, call out your airspeed. 210 knots. Target is 140 for touchdown. You're going to manage that descent with pitch only. No power changes unless I tell you. The engine you have left is your steering wheel. Through the cockpit window, the Kansas landscape was rising to meet them. Fields of wheat, brown and gold in the late afternoon sun. A farmhouse, a county road. There, the colonel said, pointing. That field. Due north, see it? Long and flat. I see it. Jake's voice was tight. You're going to overfly at once, low and fast, to check for obstacles. Power lines, fences, irrigation equipment, anything that'll tear your gear off. They descended through 10,000 feet. 8,000. The fire in the tail was visible now through the rear-facing camera, a hellish orange glow eating through the aluminum skin 5,000 feet. Jake banked, barely, painfully, using differential thrust and a prayer. The field came into view. Clear, Ryan shouted. I see nothing but dirt. Good, commit to it. You get 1 pass. You can't go around. There's no engine power for a missed approach. 3,000 feet, 2,000. Jake's hands were locked on the yoke, every muscle in his body rigid. The ground was rushing up now, terrifyingly fast. Airspeed? 160. Still too fast, pitch up. 2 degrees. If I pitch up, I'll stall. No, you won't. Trust your instruments. Trust me. 1,000 feet. Jake pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose rose. The airspeed bled off. 150. Hold it. 500 feet. The field filled the windscreen. Rows of wheat stubble, a combine harvester parked at the far end. This was happening. This was real. 140. Flare, now. Jake pulled back. The nose rose. The ground reached up. For a moment, a single crystalline moment, the aircraft seemed to float, suspended between sky and earth. Then the main gear touched dirt. The impact was bone-rattling. The plane bounced, slammed down again. The nose gear hit with a shriek of tortured metal. Jake stood on the brakes. No anti-skid. The hydraulics were gone. And the aircraft slewed wildly to the left. "Counter with right engine thrust," the colonel barked. Jake shoved the thrust lever forward. The single engine roared. The plane straightened, skidding through dirt and wheat stubble, throwing up a rooster tail of dust that blotted out the sun. The world became noise and vibration and terror. And then, impossibly, they stopped. The nose gear had collapsed. The right wing was crumpled. The fuselage had buckled in 2 places. But they were down. They were alive. For 5 seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Ryan began to laugh. A high, hysterical sound. Jake turned in his seat. The old man was still standing, his hand on the back of Jake's chair, his breathing measured and calm. "Evacuate," the colonel said quietly. "That fire will reach the fuel tanks. You have maybe 2 minutes. Get your people out." They got everyone out in 90 seconds. Sarah and her crew performed flawlessly, directing passengers down the emergency slides, away from the burning aircraft. Farmers from the surrounding area were already racing across the fields in pickup trucks. By the time the fire trucks arrived from the nearest volunteer station, Flight 447 was fully engulfed in flames, a funeral pyre of twisted metal and shattered dreams. But every single passenger and crew member was standing in that Kansas wheat field, alive and whole. Jake found the old man sitting on the running board of a farmer's truck, his jacket off now, folded neatly beside him. He wore a simple white shirt underneath. No medals, no fanfare. Jake walked over slowly and sat down beside him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "I'm sorry," Jake finally said. His voice was raw. "What I said earlier, about your jacket, I was an arrogant idiot." The old man glanced at him, a hint of amusement in his weathered eyes. "You were. I don't even know your name." "James Harlow." He extended a hand. Jake shook it. The grip was still strong. "Jake Morrison, you saved my life today, Mr. Harlow. You saved all of us." "Colonel Harlow," a voice corrected. They both looked up. A Kansas state trooper was approaching, a tablet in his hand. "I just ran your ID through the system, sir. Your FAA records came up. Colonel James Harlow, United States Air Force, retired. Distinguished Flying Cross Silver Star." He paused, reading. 10,000 flight hours. Combat missions in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Holy hell, sir. You're a genuine war hero. Jake felt something break inside him. Shame, hot and bitter, flooded his chest. "I'm not a hero," the colonel said quietly, looking away. "I'm just someone who's been scared before and learned how to keep flying anyway." Ryan appeared, limping slightly, his face smudged with dirt. He saw the colonel and stopped. His swagger was gone. He looked like what he was, a young man confronted with his own insignificance. "Sir," he began, The colonel held up a hand. "You both did fine up there. When it mattered, you listened. You followed orders. That's all I needed." "But you're young. You'll make mistakes. The trick is to survive them long enough to learn." He stood, picking up his jacket. The movement was slow, painful. The adrenaline was wearing off, and age was reasserting itself. The world doesn't need perfect pilots. It needs pilots who can adapt when everything goes wrong. You did that today. Sarah approached, tears streaming down her face. She hugged the colonel fiercely, wordlessly. He patted her back, uncomfortable with the attention. As the sun began to set over the Kansas plains, painting the burning wreckage in shades of gold and crimson, Jake Morrison stood and watched the old man walk away, his faded jacket slung over one shoulder. He would never forget the lesson. Respect isn't given to the uniform, or the rank, or the swagger. It's earned in the moments when everything falls apart, and someone steps forward who remembers how to keep the world from ending. 3 months later, Jake attended a ceremony at an Air Force museum. The FAA had ruled the emergency landing one of the most impressive examples of crew resource management in modern aviation history. But Jake knew the truth. It wasn't the crew. It was the ghost in row 23. Colonel Harlow was there, wearing the same jacket. It had been cleaned and restored by a military tailor, the patch repaired, the leather conditioned. He stood at the podium and spoke briefly about the incident. His words were simple, humble. Afterward, Jake approached him. "I've been thinking," Jake said, "about what you said, about learning from mistakes." The colonel nodded. "I want to learn more, not from a manual, from someone who's lived it. Would you... could I..." He stumbled over the words, suddenly feeling like a student again. The old man smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from him. "Buy me a cup of coffee, son," Colonel Harlow said, "and I'll tell you about the time I landed a C-130 with no hydraulics, no electrics, and a co-pilot who was bleeding out in the seat next to me." Jake bought the coffee, and he listened. Because that's what real pilots do. They listen to the ghosts who remember what it means to fly when the sky itself is falling.